Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hello, friends. Welcome to the first chapter of Literary Blend. I am so beyond excited to finally kick off this literary adventure with all of you. And joining me on the show for chapter 1, which is called Giving and Receiving Feedback, is someone who has been a true gift in the publishing industry. I'm honored to call her a friend. She is a wonderful agent, editor, and author. She is a fellow Swiftie, and she's my sunshine fairy. Please welcome Andie Smith.
Oh my goodness, that was the best introduction I could have ever asked for.
How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm delighted to have you. How's it feel to be the first guest?
Oh, so much pressure, but super exciting. So hopefully I do it justice.
Fabulous. Well, we have a wonderful conversation planned for this chapter of Literary Blend. But before we dive into that, I would love for you to share a little about yourself and your journey in the publishing industry so far.
Oh, yeah. So, my name is Andie Smith. I am a young adult author. My first book, lucky enough, came out back in October 2023 with Ever 19. And my next book, a young adult dystopian novel called Covalence, it's the first in a trilogy, will be out this October 2024 with Orange Blossom Publishing. So, exciting things on the author front there. But I am also a junior literary agent at Booker Albert Literary, and I started that in 2022 with an internship and then was promoted to the junior agent position in the fall of 2023. So have been doing that for a few months now, and I'm very excited to now represent clients and work with them on their books and help them get out their own book deals with the bigger, more exciting publishers. Because I just like to keep going, I also decided that I genuinely do love helping authors come up with ideas or cultivate their ideas a little bit more and then work with them on editing their manuscripts. So, in my not so free time, I came up with an editing business on the side called Sun and Spine's Editorial. And that is where I work with authors of pretty much any genre that I'm interested in working on a story for up to a certain word count and help them with developmental editing and line editing and also now playing around with some coaching ideas. So yeah, that's a little bit, I guess.
You're a superstar. You do so much.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a whirlwind, but it's everything I'm passionate about, so I'm just super excited to keep going.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So let's dive into our chat about giving and receiving feedback. So before we talk specifically about receiving feedback and giving feedback, I would like to chat about feedback in general and why it's such an important part of the writing process. So what are your thoughts on why feedback is important in general?
I think from my own personal experience, feedback is something that will never grow old. There's always something else out there that you don't know or that you could learn and improve upon, and you don't know what that is until you ask for it. So that's why I think getting feedback is so important to just be able to get a different perspective and see what other people are doing or thinking or getting different knowledge and pain points from other stories and things like that to see how that could then make your story even better and take it to a whole new level.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I would like to add is that I think when you look at feedback, it is a way for people in the publishing industry to engage with each other's stories. And I think that it's a wonderful community when you're involved with the writing community, getting to know other authors and editors. And when you can give and receive feedback, you are participating in this writing community, whether you are critiquing somebody else's story or someone's critiquing yours. It's a great way to just be involved and work with other authors and other editors to expand your network and build relationships in the industry.
Oh, absolutely. And the writing community is amazing. Like, we love each other and love to support everyone, whether, there's agents involved, publishers, editors, just authors trying to get their names out there. We're all so supportive of each other, and I think that's the best space for it. And there's always going to be someone that's willing to take a look at your story and help give you feedback.
Right, absolutely. And the other thing too is that I don't care if you're a New York Times bestseller, your first draft is not perfect. It's always going to be part of the process to get feedback. And so I think as we dive deeper into our conversation, we're going to chat about why giving it and receiving it is really important. But just from a very general standpoint, it is very essential. It's a way to engage with the writing community and grow as an author and as an editor through that whole process.
Absolutely.
So let's transition into receiving feedback. So, Andy, why is receiving feedback so essential as authors?
It's essential because, like I said, there's always something that you can do better, even if you think, you like you said, your first draft is never perfect. Sometimes you might think it is, and you think you just wrote the most amazing book and it's going to be a bestseller and you're going to get an agent so quickly and it's going to go on submission and sell super fast. Well, 9 times out of 10, probably not, but there's that 1 in a million chance that that's correct, and if you're that person, like, props to you. But most of the time, there's gonna be something that needs to be fixed. So and when I say fixed, it doesn't mean that something necessarily has to change or, a bunch of pages and chapters need to be deleted and rewritten, but fixed in the sense of there's always gonna be something that might need just a little bit of love. So whether that's word count is a huge issue that authors run into when receiving feedback. There's specific word count guidelines for each genre. So making sure that you're fitting those guidelines. So you might need to add words, you might need to cut words, or pacing might be too slow or too fast for the story that you're writing, or you need to flesh out some characters or delete some characters if they don't make sense for the story. There's always going to be something that you need to tweak. And I think that's so important in receiving feedback so that you can take a moment and see what other people have to say, because you can also stare at your story all day long for days on end and finally come to a point where you don't know what's missing, what it needs. So that's what's super important about sending it to, whether you have critique partners or beta readers or meeting someone new in the writing community or enlisting a developmental editor to come in and help you with that and take a look at your story and get a different perspective and see what another person might think it needs is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think it's important how you pointed out how you can look at a story for a very long time and not know what to do. I feel like I've gotten to that point in everything that I wrote, whether it be a short story or a full manuscript. You can only do so much on your own until you need somebody else's opinions. Because when we write stories in our heads, it's very clear. We know what we are trying to do. But sometimes some of the things in that story don't land the way we envisioned. And so I think that's why it's essential to get other eyes on the story, because that person who is diving into your story has never read it. They know nothing about it. And so they're reading it as a reader would if it was on a bookshelf. They're picking it up and reading it. And so you're getting a complete outside perspective on that story. And the other thing too is that different people have different perspectives on the world. They have different strengths as authors and readers. And so I think when you get different perspectives as well, you're really allowing other people to bring their own perspectives to that story and see what is working, what isn't working. Because I think what is really nice is that, especially when you get feedback and when I get feedback too, is you point out the things that are working and the things that aren't. And so you're letting the author know, hey, you did amazing with world building and amazing with characterization, but maybe your pacing was a little slow. Maybe your dialogue wasn't very authentic. And so we have people pointing these things out to you. It gives you a clear vision to see what you can fix and how to have a plan of attack when you dive in to do revisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that's super important to me as an editor and helping authors is I think they need to know what is working and what they're doing well. So I do include that in my edit letter when I send them a project back. I call it points of recognition. And I like to let them know what I recognized and what they did well, because it also comes to a point of being able to accept constructive criticism. And I struggled with that as an author so much, especially when writing my first couple of books and would get feedback that pretty much like it wasn't that good and it needed work. And there's books that I've written that will never see the light of day because of that, right? So it is central to the process, but I had to take a moment and step back and really understand that the feedback I was receiving wasn't a reflection of who I am or my ability to write or my talent, but was just the words on the paper and the way that they were working. And once I made that kind of disconnection and that emotional break from myself and the work, I was able to also see the story through a different lens and understand, oh, okay, I could see how that could be confusing, or that doesn't make sense. They're right. It has nothing to do with who you are or your ability to write or your talent. So I think that's super important in understanding feedback as well. But that's why I try to always include something to let the author know, like, hey, yeah, this is working. Great job on this. Now let's just focus on this to just make your story as polished and perfect as it can possibly be, whether you're seeking representation for an agent or you're going to self publishing or doing independent publishing and submitting to small presses. Let's just make it the prettiest version that it can possibly be, but understand what you're doing well and then just focus on the areas that need a little bit more love.
Yeah, what you said is absolutely perfect. And I think it's really great to highlight again that whenever you receive feedback, it can be extremely overwhelming. And so it's always really good to read over the feedback, take a step back, let it sink in, and then return to it with fresh eyes and try as hard as possible, at least I do, to take an objective approach because this is your book, baby. You love it and you think that it's fantastic, and it is fantastic, but it definitely can be improved. And so when you try to take an objective approach and say, okay, these are the suggestions, let me see what this editor or beta reader or critique partner is trying to say, and then definitely weigh it to see if you align with what they're saying. Because I think a thing with receiving feedback is some of it is useful and some of it isn't. And I think the more feedback you get and the more perspectives you get, if you're getting three or four people saying the exact same thing, then bells should be ringing in your head like, hey, okay, I should probably address this. But you definitely will have instances where different people are saying conflicting things on the exact same thing. And when you get those kind of comments and notes, it's leaning into the realm of fiction is completely subjective. And so you're not going to please everybody. And so in those instances, I try to think about the story, look at the comments, and see what I feel makes the most sense for the story if I get that conflicting advice, and then make the tweak, see how it works. If it doesn't work, you can always change it back. But I think it's really important to always let the feedback sink in and not discard it because it can be very overwhelming, but you have to take a look at it, let it sink in, and then make the changes that you feel would make your story shine.
Oh my goodness, that and you said make your story shine,
Oh,
which
oh
is
my God. I didn't
my
even think about that when I said that.
I love that. That is exactly what I'm trying to do at Sun and Spines is we wanna make your story shine, so thank you for that call out. But I couldn't have said it better myself, honestly. That's another thing that I wanted to bring up too is that feedback is subjective. So you might get some really strong feedback that you are so excited about and just really vibe with and want to start implementing right away, and then you might get feedback that you question a little bit because it might change your story into a different direction than you initially wanted it to go into. And that's where, like you said, it's super important to take a beat and just kind of walk away from it and sit with the feedback for a few days and then come back to it and really decide if it's something that you want to do, if it makes sense for your story. And it's okay to say no. It's okay to say thank you for that feedback and then not do anything with it. If it doesn't fit with the plot line that you wanted to go on, or if they told you to delete a character and you're in love with that character and you have other plans for them and you want to keep them, that is your decision at the end of the day. And it's totally valid because you are the author. It is your story. Only you know what will be best for your story and what makes sense. So always understand that when receiving feedback as well as you don't have to implement any of the changes if you don't want to.
Right, absolutely. And another point I wanted to explore with you for a couple minutes is that for authors who have never received feedback on their work before, it can be extremely daunting to send that work out. I know for me, especially when I was in school and then did my master's, it was like, oh no, I'm going to be in a critique group with like six other other people in a classroom and they're going to be ripping my story apart out loud in front of a professor. Like, it was very scary at first. And so I think it's really great to highlight some pieces of advice for authors who maybe have never gotten feedback before. What would you tell them?
I want to say to that point, there is always going to be someone out there that doesn't like your work, whether that's a beta reader or after you've published it and you get a 1 star or 2 star review because they just didn't connect with it for some reason, that it's going to happen. And I almost feel like the sooner that that happens, the better, so that you can kind of learn from it and know again that it's not a reflection of who you are or your talent and your ability as a writer. And finding a way to sort of move past it, I think, is super important, because out of that one person, then there's going to be 500 people that love it. So it's important to really focus on the positives, as because there are a lot of negatives in writing, and there can be negatives in the writing community too. We've all seen it. So trying to just stay positive and focus on the people that are actually adding value to your work and the feedback process is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And going off of that point, I think whenever you're sending your work out for the first time, before going to maybe an editor that you've heard about but never worked with before, that can be really scary. So, what I would suggest maybe is to send it first to some of your author friends, people you know, people you trust, who you know for a fact will be kind and give you constructive criticism and not tear you down and make you feel bad about yourself, because there definitely are people who sadly just get empowered from tearing people down, which is very sad and disheartening, but that is out there. And so, to avoid your first feedback experience being like that, I think it's really important to maybe send it to somebody who you trust so you know you're getting kind feedback and helpful feedback. And the other thing, too, I want to add is that if you haven't gotten feedback before, what I would try to do is to adopt the mindset that whenever you get feedback, you're going to be able to revise to make your story even better. Whenever I send my work out, I am doing it because I'm very excited to hear what people say, and because I know after I get that feedback and revise it, it's going to be better than it was before. And so, always trying to remember that the people you're sending your work to have good intentions to help you in order for you to get this book where it needs to be to make your publishing dreams a reality. And like you said, self-publishing, becoming represented by an agent, going with a small press, all of the paths are completely valid. But what's consistent throughout all of that is you need to have a polished, publishable book. And so getting that feedback will help your book get closer to making those publishing dreams come true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said too about finding people that you can trust and connect with. And that can take some time, and that's okay. I always recommend when you're sending your work out there, whether, I mean, you can pursue the path of hiring a developmental editor, or there, like I said, there are so many people in the writing community that will be more than happy to read your work. They get super excited to dive into a story and help provide feedback. And they are a valid choice as well, and they're free. So there are free resources out there for you. And there are, of course, editors that you can hire and to take a look at it as well. But I know some of the people that you'll meet and that you'll connect with will then become your writing friends, and you get to kind of then return the favor and review one of their stories and provide feedback, which is super exciting. Which is how I got into my editing service, because I just absolutely loved beta reading. And I was like, this is great. I want to do this on an even bigger scale and like for the rest of my life. Please and thank you. So I think it's really wonderful. And I always recommend not having too many cooks in the kitchen also with feedback, because, like you said, feedback can be very overwhelming. And when you start getting feedback from 5, 6, 7 different sources, it can be a little daunting, and you can start to question everything from A to Z in your book. And we don't want that. We want you to be confident in your work, and we want you to stay true to the initial storyline that you initially wanted to develop. So, for that reason, I always recommend 3 people max. If you want to do more, that's totally fine. But just what I've seen work for myself and then my own writing community friends as well is 3 people max. 2 of those people should be in the writing community or writers that you connect with or that you share a similar style to. Maybe you have a really good friend that you met online that also writes young adult fantasy. They would be a great person to send your young adult fantasy to, since they are working kind of in the same genre, in the same space, and they kind of have a similar idea, style, or direction that they can help maximize feedback for. It doesn't have to be someone in the same genre, but I just have found that it's super helpful, or someone that is a completely different genre, but you have a similar, like, kind of writing style too. I have found when you find a person, a beta reader, critique partner that can kind of mesh with your style when they go in and provide inline edits or have an idea to word a sentence in a different way, and it sort of aligns with your own voice, and they some reason have this magical talent that they can just sort of mesh with your voice. It's a really beautiful thing and it helps so much. And then you can also take that sentence and be like, "Ooh, I like that, but let me change it into this way, or let me phrase it like this, or what if I have this character do this action and then prompts this dialogue." It just starts the ideas and they just start flowing. And that one little line of feedback started all of that. So it's just a magical thing that can happen.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Absolutely. My favorite thing about getting feedback is those brain blast moments that are like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
this and this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And then you like get all these great ideas. And then what's really great too is when you have somebody reading your story who loves it and is as invested in it as you are, like trying to get it to be as best as it can be, like they're going to be sharing great ideas and helping you to see your story in a new light and tossing out suggestions. And even if they suggest something that's not 100% what you are looking for, just simply hearing a comment can spark something for you. And so, yeah, fantastic. I love that so, so much. So, now let's shift gears a bit and chat about giving feedback. And I think giving feedback is so, so great, not alone because it's fun, and reading unpublished manuscripts is the coolest thing because in years I'm going to be like, oh, I read that when I was in this first draft form. I read that when the author was querying. It's going to be really fun. But the biggest thing that I love about giving feedback is it helps you grow as a writer as well. Because if you're reading a manuscript and the author doesn't really have many sensory details, or their dialogue isn't authentic, or the pacing is slow, those are things that you're picking up on as an editor and as a reader. And so when you're returning to your own manuscripts, you can be sure to avoid those issues in your own writing because you spotted them while you're editing others' work. And on the flip side of this, if you're reading a book and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the best voice, the best characterization, in turn, you can see what did the author do to make their voice pop and their characters feel so real. And then when you're going back to your manuscripts, you can apply what you learned from reading others' work. And so not only are you giving back by reading others' manuscripts, but you're also learning along the way as well.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that brings me kind of full circle to my whole point of, like, you are always learning as a writer. There's always going to be something that you don't know, or a way to make your story even better, whether that's through characterization or plot or pacing, whatever it is. There's always going to be some sort of way that you can make it better. And that has happened to me so many times when giving feedback. I'll be reading a manuscript and it's really strong in one area and then needs a little help in a different area. And by providing that, I then almost think to myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I did the exact same thing in my story. Maybe I should go take a look at that. And it just really helps you as an author to be able to disconnect from your writing style and your work, to take a moment and read maybe also a different genre. Say I'm a young adult author, and maybe I take a look at a adult manuscript, and which the writing is going to be very different than writing for YA. So being able to see those differences and understand that when giving feedback will all come around and help you with your future stories.
Right, absolutely. And I love how you brought up reading other genres and other age categories because I think that no matter what genre you're reading, no matter what age category, they will all have things that you can learn from them. And depending on the genre, like for example, thriller is like deep into suspense. Romance obviously has lots of romance. Fantasy and science fiction, massive with world building. Horror, lots of atmosphere. And If you're writing a thriller with a romance subplot, well, I guarantee you reading a romance will help you strengthen that. If you are writing a horror, but you're not that great with atmosphere and setting and sensory details, I guarantee you by critiquing a fantasy or in science fiction, you will get to take a deep dive into sensory details and setting and help strengthen that in your own writing. And so I truly believe that every single genre has something to offer. And so by critiquing others' work and reading outside your genre, even just as a reader, not only just with editing others' work, but just as a reader too, stepping outside your genre and exploring other genres will just make you a more well-rounded writer overall.
100%. I cannot stress enough the importance, whether you're currently querying or you're trying to get a deal with a small publisher, whatever it is that is the path that you're going. I highly, highly recommend, and people say this all the time, to not just read the stories that are in the genre that you're writing, but like you said, read other genres, whether that's working on feedback with another writing friend or working with an editor on something for maybe a fun passion project or whatever it is. It's so important because there's going to be little details that you can pick up on and then implement in your story. And that's what writing is, right? We're all sort of here doing the same thing and creating these different stories. So one sort of idea or concept could go 500 different ways depending on the writer.
Right, absolutely. And one more thing I wanted to touch on with giving feedback is something we kind of went into a little bit earlier with it's important to be kind when you're giving feedback, point out things the author did well, but also point out areas where they can improve. But for anyone who hasn't given feedback before, is there anything else you would like to add for best practices while critiquing another author's work?
Yeah, of course, like you said, it's super important to be kind. It may be that for person's first time sending out their work also. So, and there's different flows and structures. I mean, there's great resources for, examples of edit letters and things like that. You don't have to get super fancy with it. When I first started out, what I did was I just kind of wrote a word vomit email to the author that I was helping and was just like, this is what I liked. This is what I think could use a little bit of fluff or some love. And then here's kind of my ideas that spun from this section or this character development or things like that. So I would say don't be afraid to be honest. Also, there's I feel with feedback a certain insecurity almost of your own opinion because one, you don't want to hurt their feelings, but two, we're all sort of feeling this imposter syndrome as authors, right? Like, who am I to judge someone else's story? Who am I to provide this feedback? Is it valid? Do I know what I'm talking about? Yes, you do. No matter your experience level, if you're passionate about writing, you're passionate about reading, that gives you validity. You're fine. So be confident in the feedback that you're giving because if you read it and that's what you thought, then that's valid. And that is something that another reader might think and have the exact same point, but because you didn't bring it up and another person did, then the author is only hearing it once. And that's one of the things they're debating implementing or not. So you never know what level your feedback could have on the author. So don't be afraid to be honest, be respectful, but be honest and share your thoughts and what you truly thought of the story and areas that you think could use a little more fleshing out and areas that maybe you didn't think were necessary, I think are super important too.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a fabulous chat. And just to wrap up this part of the conversation with giving and receiving feedback, what are some final thoughts you have overall about why, as authors, it is important to both give and receive feedback?
I think, again, giving feedback will help you hone your craft and it connects you with other writers and authors in this space, which brings you lifelong friends, which is super fun because those are the ones that are going to be supporting you along the way through all of your wonderful publishing journey that you go on. So it's always great to seek advice and then give advice when you can as well. And in terms of seeking advice, I think it's super important to be open to it, be receptive, and just be ready to use it and implement it to take your story to a new level At Sun and Spines, we like to say to make your story shine.
Fabulous, Andy. This has been truly a delight. And that is a wrap on our conversation on giving and receiving feedback. But this brings us to the very first literary blend plot twist. Are you ready, Andy?
Oh, I don't know. Am I? I love a good plot twist. Let's do it.
So, what the plot twist is a question that you could have never seen coming, and I'm trying my very best to make these random and unhinged. So, this is going to be fun. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
So, you are a Swiftie, correct?
Absolutely.
So, what I'm going to do is give you two Taylor Swift albums, and I want you to pair them with a genre.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Fearless and Reputation.
Fearless, I want to pair with young adult contemporary. And ooh, do you want me to explain?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. And that's also from personal experience because that was definitely an album that I was listening to in middle school and wanting to just meet my boyfriend outside the house and kiss in the car and all those fun, cute little things. And it just makes me think of high school and fun, flirty, happy memories. So I say young adult contemporary for that. Um, let's see. Oh, Reputation. I mean, I feel like this might be a little obvious, but to me, I immediately think of fantasy, whether that's young adult or adult, but like dark fantasy, obviously. So I think Jennifer L. Armentrout. Oh my gosh, love her. She's my new favorite fantasy author for the past like 2 or 3 years. Holly Black, like those sorts of vibes that I'm going with there.
Oh my goodness, fantastic. Great.
I love that. That was the funnest thing I've ever answered in my life. Funnest, most fun. Here I am, an editor, and saying funnest.
So next time you're listening to Fearless, think YA Contemporary. And when you're listening to Reputation, think Dark Fantasy. And you can credit Andy for that one.
Thank you. I love it.
Perfect. Well, before we go, can you please share with everybody where they can connect with you online and check out all of the fabulous things you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on Instagram and Twitter at Andie Smith Books. My website is also andiesmithbooks.com. And that would probably be the best place. I have the link to my agency website as well, Booker Albert Agency on there. My manuscript wishlist link is on there as well. And it's also pasted on my website. So if you are interested in querying me for agency representation, you can find that information there. And then the link to Sun and Spine's editorial is on there as well. And it's also connected in my Twitter. We all have the whole link tree thing going now. So you can always find all of my links on my Twitter page as well, or X. Are we calling it X? I'm still calling it Twitter.
Literally, it's Twitter. X doesn't exist.
It does not exist. So yes, that's kind of the best place to reach me, where I'm most active, and my links to agenting, author stuff, and editorial stuff is all on there.
Fantastic. Well, Andy, thank you for joining me for the first chapter of Literary Blend. It's been a total delight having you.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. The time has flown by, and I'm sad to be parting ways, but I appreciate you having me, and I can't wait to see what all the authors have to say about giving feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for joining me. And listeners, that is a wrap on Chapter 1 of Literary Blend with Andie Smith, all about giving and receiving feedback. If you enjoyed our conversation, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in the publishing industry you think would enjoy the show, please pass it along to them. Thank you for listening, and until we flip to the next chapter, happy reading and writing.